Thank you everyone for joining us today. Well, there are many people with many different roles from various industries attending this session today. I know you all have one thing in common, You recognize the value of mobility to reach your workforce. For many of you, that usually means breaking new ground within your organization. And that means you need to build your case before you get buy-in from your decision makers. Just as important, you need an app that your users are going to adopt as part of their daily way of working. Our goal with today's webinar is to give you practical advice and real-world examples of what we are seeing and experiencing, both with companies that are mature in their mobile journey and companies that are just starting out. So with that, let's dive in. I'd like to just quickly go through a few housekeeping announcements. So we are recording today's webinar, and we will be sending you the recording and the slides from today's webinar within the next 24 hours. And if any time during the session you have questions, please submit them in the chat window, and we will definitely get to them at the end or even throughout as it makes sense. Next, I would love to introduce today's presenters. I think Jeanette and Stephanie have actually been working together now throughout their careers for over 13 years now, if I'm not mistaken. And their goal is always with the focus of using modern technology to solve problems for clients. Across his career, Jeanette has specialized in helping innovative companies accelerate the adoption and alignment of emerging enterprise mobility and collaboration technologies. And Stephanie is definitely passionate about changing the way people work in order to be more efficient, productive, and ultimately more satisfied with their job. So thank you both for joining us. And Steph, I'm going to turn it over to you to begin today's session.
Great. Thanks, Jen, and thanks everyone for joining us. And Jeanette, I'm looking forward to the next half hour or so with you. So before we jump in, I did want to give you just a quick overview of who we are at Sitrion. Our mission from day one has really been about how can you make work better. And we do this by offering technology solutions for your employees to really help them stay connected and engaged. For the past 12 years, we've been helping enterprises increase this level of employee productivity and most importantly, the employee's ability and willingness to work. So I'm going to share with you today a lot of best practices and insight into how to build your business case. And I thought I would just set the stage with a bit about us so you can understand how we came up with this webinar, and most importantly, recognize that a lot of the thinking has come from the hundreds of customers that we've been working with who have already started on this exciting new technology journey. So we're all here, as Jen mentioned, for a common cause, and that's really to build a business case for an employee app. And I'm going to take just a few minutes before we jump into the bulk of the business case outline to just talk about mobile, because most of you have probably already recognized this, but maybe not everyone in your organization is really on board with this idea. But we know that mobile is really rewriting or redefining how we work. Gone are the days where people need to be sitting at a computer to get things done. There's lots of expectations out there now that everyone can do the same amount of things on their small mobile device as they can do when they're either at their desk or logging on a terminal, etc. So it is really rewriting the way we work, and all of you today are challenged with how can you take mobile and leverage all these amazing aspects of what it can do and change the way your employees are engaging and interacting with your organization. A couple stats for you that maybe you can share with others in your organization who are quickly trying to figure out what makes sense for you, or maybe just haven't really digested how important mobile is in the plans that you're building. So these are a few statistics that we pulled from the State of Mobile News, and what it's really just sharing is how important and how much time people spend using mobile in their daily life, and therefore how critical it is for us to make it the standard moving forward. I often think about what my day would be like if I didn't have my mobile phone as I navigated commuting into my office or trying to get to a meeting or an appointment. And it really is paralyzing in our personal lives to get rid of our mobile devices because we've become so accustomed to all the great value that it offers. And employees are expecting the same thing. And so our challenge is to build a business case that the organization will be excited about and respect as the next way that you are engaging with your employees, but also allow them to realize that this is really the path that is going to be most productive and most engaging for your employees, and it's a path that everybody should start their journey on. And how do we make it as acceptable and easy for all of you to take that path? Last statistic, I promise, but again, this is just to help you really validate that mobile is important. And what I like about this slide, or what really resonates with me here, is just the reality of, we talked about how important mobile is in our personal lives, but it's also important at the workplace because so many people are just deskless, whether their job requires them to work somewhere that they're not at a computer, or they are somebody who is just running from meeting to meeting. There's so much time that most employees are not bound by a desk. And so we should really embrace this concept that today not being bound by a desk has a ton of advantages. And so you can really grow the time that employees are engaged with you by allowing them to experience things in a mobile experience. If you look at the way that we have really provided applications as service providers to our employees up till now, it's been about applications. And so I'm sure many of you have already been part of initiatives to build out your company intranet or your HR self-service portal or any other type of application that employees need to go to get things done. And what we're recommending here, and what we're seeing to really resonate, is to just kind of change the paradigm and almost flip this on its head to say, why try to always find a destination for an employee to go to? Why not take what is important to that employee and aggregate it onto their mobile device in a way that makes sense for them in their role and with their level of responsibility and things that they need to do to get done? So we're not necessarily reinventing the way that we work. We're actually just changing the way people work from what has always been the norm of please go to this website or this portal to do X, to understanding the employee and what they need and giving them the information and the experience at the time that's relevant for them. So let's jump in. We organized this session into 6 sections to help you really outline the best way to approach building out this business case. And Junaid and I are going to hopefully interact a bit for the remainder of the webinar, where he'll be sharing some great insights into not only the best practices that we're recommending, but some real examples of what he's seen happen out there in the industry. So hopefully you can each tie yourself or your organization to 1 or 2 of the examples that we give you, plus maybe be inspired to think of things that are just really relevant for your own organization, and use this structure as a way to consolidate everything into a plan that you can then bring forward to your organization and get a lot of people behind the momentum of building out your employee app. So the best place to start is really about benefits. And most of you are here because you're looking at some form of a solution. So maybe you have already figured out why you want to have that solution. But sometimes I find that we go forward for the solution, but we haven't had a chance to just really stop and capture why that solution matters. What drove you to go on this journey with us? What drove you to either attend this webinar or start looking at solutions? Or if you've already gone further down the path, what drove you to the state you're at now? And more importantly, what is driving your organization to go down this journey? I put up a couple examples here of things we hear quite often, which is really about that streamlined communication channel and reaching the entire workforce. But most of you probably have some of these in mind, but there may be unique things in your organization that allowing all of your employees to have access on their mobile device to great content and great services could really change the game for you. So I want to encourage you to start your business plan by thinking about what are the benefits that you want to get out of this new solution. And the nice thing about it too is really that the benefits are something you can start to measure down the road. So all of a sudden you have your foundation when you do go down this path to know, are you building something that is going to have long-term results? So this isn't just a one-time, here's some benefits and move on. This is something you can go back and check against to just remind yourself of why you started on this journey and what are the benefits you were hoping to achieve, and then is that the outcome that you're starting to see as you get more and more further along on this journey with us for a mobile app. So I'll let Janae kind of talk you through a couple examples where companies have started to build out these benefits and what they look like.
Thanks, Stephanie. So some of the examples that really come to mind through our experience is that we had the fortune of working with a very large pharmaceutical company, and they had already begun the mobile journey quite early on for their pharmaceutical reps, as you'd imagine, always being on the road. Now, we might not all have the resources of a large, corporation at this, but they did jump in kind of with both feet and were able to build a multitude of employee mobile apps that covered things from training to communications to workflows to interacting with customer data. And you might think, well, great, they've got all the resources they need. Things must be, perfect for them, and that, employees must be smitten. But if you roll this future forward and you actually play this out, sometimes, less is actually more, and more apps is not necessarily the answer. And it turns out this is what we mean on that slide that Stephanie showed earlier about, destinations versus services. The fact that there were so many apps didn't actually streamline work because it didn't really take into consideration the fact that, well, if jumping between 500 apps on a desktop is fun, it's certainly not any more fun on a small mobile device. So really, that organization, their employees actually wanted to have a single application where they would have alerts that would notify them of changes happening, invoices, procedures, new news, right? And really that push versus pull was a significant difference to making the productivity gains that were actually promised and expected through mobile applications really take hold. So this concept of aggregating everything into one app is really, really powerful. Another great example around that other benefit of communications and engagement was some of the work we did with one of the larger rental car companies that I'm sure you've seen at a lot of the airports around this holiday season. And what's interesting is that it's not unique for this company and a lot of companies in North America and abroad, is that, I guess as white-collar workers, we kind of assume that we all have a corporate email. Of course we would, right? That's how we get our news, that's how we get our information, that's how we get secure access to our intranet. But, that's really not the case for all folks in the workforce. And in fact, for this company, the vast majority of folks do not have an email address. So, how does one actually communicate or engage with staff when they don't even have this, email technology, which has been around since, the 1980s? So for them, their ability to actually get information on a mobile device was really a true breakthrough in terms of communication. So you can imagine the impact in an organization being able to reach staff, besides having to use a corkboard or just word of mouth for important communications and other information. So a highly engaging way to connect with folks, especially for part-time and shift worker type folks. Even in the manufacturing setting, it's really, really easy and straightforward way to communicate with folks. And as well, another example in the healthcare space is that we know there's a lot of growth and acquisition and mergers in these areas. We worked with a company that was going through this phase of growth, and they found that one of the biggest challenges for the communications team in that organization was really trying to drive engagement through that period of change, right? So obviously, if you've gone through a merger and acquisition, it's a time of uncertainty and change, and so that's always a big challenge for the executives all the way down to every single employee. And so they found that the average time to actually, say, onboard a new company and get them hooked into corporate email and intranets and user IDs, and that challenge of merging those two IT systems could span anywhere from 3 months to 2 years. And so, 2 years is a long time to wait before you can send, targeted communications messages and, foster communications to keep those employees engaged. So I don't think we'd really want to wait that long. And so they address that challenge by being able to deploy an employee mobile app straight away and have that so that we can truly make an impact directly after a merger and acquisition and have communications from day one. And furthermore, because of the ease of use of mobile technology, we're actually able to have a two-way dialogue where those employees can ask questions of their managers and really actually speed up the merger and acquisition process because they can have such clarity and remove any kind of confusion by being able to ask questions and interact directly with the people to help them actually engage. And so the next part of this is beyond being able to look at some of these examples and use cases is really determining which of these scenarios is actually valuable for your organization. And I'll leave Stefanie to explain a bit of this.
Thanks, Junaid. One thing I heard over and over again in Junaid's examples was what the employees were asking for. And so that's a perfect segue into this next step in building out your business case, which is really about, do you know your employees' needs? This is one of my more favorite components because I have so often been part of projects where we built out what we felt to be the most phenomenal solution ever and realized that it didn't always match perfectly with what employees needed. And so understanding what your employees need first and foremost is such a critical part of this business case. And it's not an easy task, right? I understand that you're all coming from organizations that have all different kinds of employees, the cross between managers and individual contributors, or people who sit in a corporate office versus folks who are out in the field who may not have access to a desk. I mean, there's so many variables, but think about who do you want to involve, how do you get the best cross-section of all the different types of employees that can benefit from your solution, and then what do you want to ask them? One recommendation I would make here is try to figure out a way to gather the information and ask the questions that give you some quantitative results. It's great to have the commentary, and everyone that I've spoken to in the past has never been shy to give you the laundry list of the things that they want, but sometimes it becomes hard for us who are trying to build out that business case to really navigate all of these disparate answers. So think about what you want to ask and how you can do it in a way that you have a good combination of quantitative answers that can guide this initiative in the right direction, but also some comments and qualitative stuff that you can still read and get a better foundation for why the answers are coming in the way that they're at. Surveys are great for this, for those of you who have access to some way to reach folks. Also getting people who are maybe managers of certain groups or have access to a subset of your organization to spearhead some of this research is also great because, again, it all comes down to knowing what your employees need and building out the right benefits for them. And then the last thing I'll just mention before we go into some examples is everyone is going to look for the what's in it for me part of this journey when you get to the point where you have an employee app that you're rolling out. So this is the perfect way to address the what's in it for me aspect early on, and you know that moving forward you're going to give your folks a solution that already answers the what's in it for me question, and eventually will really drive to better adoption and user experiences when you get to that stage.
Quite right. And to expand upon Stefanie's point about that, really intrinsic question of quote unquote, what's in it for me, what's in it for the employees. It's such a subtle but important question because I think near and dear to the heart of most folks who are rolling out solutions for their staff, there's always the concern that like, hey, well, what if folks don't use this, right? And by taking those questions on up front and looking at really, getting feedback from people on the front line, the folks that you want to have your application use, you can go ahead and address that. And we found that that's really best addressed in forms of workshops and surveys that we'll share with you. But I think it is really the crux of really any kind of employee tool is that really making sure that the way that you propose the solution and the way that it's actually presented and prototyped and so forth, you've really got good buy-in from the stakeholders you're trying to get and drive adoption with. And so just to provide some examples here, one of which again was another healthcare company that did employee surveys and workshops, and they didn't just do it with say let the end users of the application, but they went to over 7 different physical locations to conduct these workshops, and they looked at it more of a holistic approach to have also middle management, HR directors, and other folks of all different titles, as well as clinicians and nurses as well. And what this did is it gave them a really good cross-section of the different types of employees that would want to have an employee app. And they had different needs. It turned out that, as we'll find out later on, that some of the clinicians wanted to be able to access information that was relevant to them, kind of in that what's in it for me sense, and tickled that selfish fancy for them to speed up their day. Whereas for HR directors, they wanted to be able to publish information specifically within their hospital, right? Targeted news, so that they could have really leverage a mobile application for communication. So totally different needs, and that's because there is no one use case that's going to satisfy all employees. And in fact, you have to have a really personalized experience that's unique to each employee to make it relevant for them. In addition, we had the fortune of working with an insurance company, a large one in Australia, and we did live focus groups. We were able to basically go beyond just the identification of the benefits of a mobile app, but we brought in different folks from different job types and responsibilities. And what was really unique about this workshop, as you can see in this this background image, which was actually quite similar to the scenario there, was that beyond just having so like a whiteboard, it was more of a live user experience bar, if you will. So people walked up, they were able to actually open up the application. They were able to click through the application, conduct some sample workflows, and all this really without any information or prompting. It was just kind of see if you can figure out what to do with the app. Is it easy enough to do this without an instruction manual? And we had some really great positive feedback and also some really good insights at the same time. And again, it goes back to saying that when you design your business case, it's important to really address the fact that managers typically want something different from the individual contributors. In this case, for a financial services company, the managers are really keen to have things that are based around being able to approve tasks. And I'm sure if you're a manager, if you have lots of travel expense approvals and vacation request approvals, piling up in your inbox, that's a common thing that would be really helpful to draw managers and directors back into the application. And we also learned that that different age groups had different levels of comfort in general with a mobile device. But across the board, what was telling was that with this organization that all folks really did appreciate using a mobile app despite demographics. So it was actually on a positive side, because I think they were thinking that some folks really wouldn't adopt a mobile app, but that didn't stand true for the demographic.
Thanks, Janae. Just to take a minute as we are hopefully all jotting down great ideas about the benefits and what employees need, to remind you about collaborating with other groups. So all of you are here, and I commend you for being here because you're willing to sort of embark on this journey and figure out your next steps. And I want to encourage you to think about who else in your organization you can work with on this initiative. So some common things we see is, CorpCom is driving a lot of this because they are really interested in getting the right information into the hands of all their employees, and a perfect partner for them might be someone in HR who's also trying to make sure that employees have access to great HR-related information, or someone in operations who has an outlying system that employees need to log into to do approvals. So think about who a partner or partners could be for you in this journey. An employee app is what the name entails. It's that single app for your employees to go to. And so no single department can really go at this alone and provide the amount of value that we see so many organizations getting out of an employee app. So think about who your best partners would be. Join forces with them early. Allow them to also participate in the benefits building and the employee information gathering, so that you really have a different lens to look at, to look through with them. And then lastly, let's be real, bringing other people also brings more budget. So don't be afraid to ask them to pitch in to help make this the most powerful solution you can by also, combining forces of priorities. So a couple groups prioritizing to make mobile really work in their organization is so powerful. So how can you find those right partners to go on this journey with? And I think Jeanette has some good examples of a couple organizations who have found good partnerships and can probably share that with us.
That's right. That's right. And what's so valuable about that, as you were pointing out, Stefanie, is that this is really how you make the app sticky, right? This is the secret sauce of how you can get folks. If you're an internal communicator, you can get folks to actually go into the app on a regular basis and read your news. If you're someone in HR, this is how you can really have someone actually get their tasks done on time, and reduce that support cost. Because the more functionality that you bring inside this, you're creating a center of attention, if you will, to borrow from a marketing term. And what that does is it just really streamlines people's day, and they find it so much more convenient to be able to have all these different functions in one single application. So what we've seen is with one of the mining companies that we've worked with, the IT team had a project to deploy mobile for a collection of managers to help them with workflows. And then the finance team saw that as an opportunity to expand upon that for other workflows such as expense reporting, invoice approvals, from systems like SAP and Concur. And another example as well, we mentioned a few times, a healthcare company that was really trying to improve upon internal communications. They actually saw that there's a great opportunity because there was existing demand within the HR team for a way to actually have their staff, conduct some of their employee self-services on a mobile device, which they couldn't do before. This was a perfect opportunity to not, spend, extra budget, have two different projects and two separate teams, but instead combine that into one effort, saving money for the organization, but also at the same time making life easier for employees because they don't have to have two separate apps, right? Or, if you play this out again in the case of that other pharmaceutical company, it could be 10, 20, 30 apps that are on an individual's phone and creating just more confusion than streamlining, in fact. And finally, just to bring up another example in financial services, one of the larger banks that we work with was that, we saw that there was a project we had helped with them to be able to have IT perform kind of like straightforward tasks like resetting passwords and PINs and access help desk information. And during this process, the IT team had saw that there was a lot of unmet demand for other business units who are trying to be able to deliver solutions on a mobile device that sometimes by themselves wouldn't really warrant developing a mobile application, right? So an example of this was that this common use case that is probably near and dear to anyone's heart here is that if you enjoy the place you work and you want it to grow, you want to really make sure it has the best talent. So we saw that there is a team within HR and talent and recruiting that was looking basically at trying to find a way to be able to refer a friend to apply for a position at the bank. And if you really think about this one use case and how valuable it is, just think about how much it goes into recruiting, right? If you've had to hire folks, and if you look at recruiting fees and so on and so forth, and the time to train people, it's quite a costly endeavor. In financial services, it might be anywhere from 10 to 20K just per applicant, when you're trying to actually recruit someone. And so, we thought, along with the IT team at this bank, and said, well, hey, if everyone in the bank has this, this help desk application on their phone already, then the same app can also refer a friend. Just be another function within the same application. And then all employees could use that when they're at a barbecue and their friend asks them, hey, if there's any open jobs at the bank. And this is a great way to build that, again, that point about return on investment. It's a fantastic use case because the reality is that most employees would never go and download a refer a friend app just on its own. It's really only a few subset of people who would really venture out to do that, and go in the app store and download the new app and log in. So you really want to think about how you can take advantage of the fact that you've already got a beachhead of an application deployed on someone's phone in an existing employee app, and how you can add functions on there that just continue to grow and expand and add value and actually build up the ROI of your application as it evolves over time. I think Stefanie will explain a bit more about that as you build your business case around that point.
Sure. Thanks, Jeanette. ROI, I have yet to see a business case that does not have those three daunting letters of ROI, right? So we all know that, the first thing people are going to ask as we present that business case is what is the ROI? And it is not as daunting as you might think, and it's actually something that is so critical as you build out that business case. A couple things to think about is, one is, mobile is a big initiative for a lot of organizations right now, and so there are a ton of just broad industry statistics and benefits you can share with what happens to an organization when you empower your employees to have better accessibility via mobile devices. So there's tons of industry statistics out there. I'm sure any of us here could help you find some, but don't be shy to share those broad industry benefits, because the reality is if you're not going mobile, you're missing out. And so it's a good thing to remind people that this is how organizations are succeeding and that the benefits they're seeing. And then think about, of course, what are the ROI that you would see in your own organization. There's a couple ways you can look at it. There's going to be some ROI that's a little softer in terms of increased productivity by having information at my fingertips, or response times to different approvals because it's right there. Those are all really key, and you can start to make some inferences based on knowing that the average time it takes for someone to do something on not having it at their fingertips on a mobile device is longer than what it will be once it's right accessible. But there's also things you can measure from day one that is just about interactivity with the app. So think about the perfect combination of productivity and engagement gains that might be considered a little softer, and then the real data that you can provide, like how many people are logging on, how many people are commenting or liking on things, how many people are approving in a timely manner. These are real tangible statistics you can get out of an environment that can help you prove out this ROI. So it's an important part of the business case, but it's also a very achievable part if you really think about the benefits of changing the way people work by giving them all of this great access right within their mobile experience. And Junaid, I know you have a couple examples of what does mobile mean for an organization, and then also how some organizations have figured out this ROI opportunity.
Yeah, that's right, I do. And so these are some of our favorite statistics that we've seen come from third-party research, industry experts in the space, around looking at really an aggregate view of folks who've already gone on this journey. So luckily for you, you can take advantage of this and use this when you're discussing with your stakeholders around the value of mobile apps. And so this training is actually not so much focused on use cases, but it's about the downstream effects of an app-enabled workforce. And so some of these statistics point to being much more likely to estimate that your company itself is a forward-looking company because you're growing and you're actually at that modern level. So this is really ties into a story we'll talk about later about a large high-tech company wanting to make sure they can attract the best talent and feel like they're getting that, really working at one of the most modern workforces out there, which is part of for a lot of companies their brand promise is to be an innovative market leader. Another one is that, of course, is for many of the companies here, about 22%, they're actually more likely to recommend their employer, right? They're more likely to go out and refer a friend or a colleague to someone to actually join their organization. And I don't know if that's because they have that refer a friend app on their phone or if that's just general, but that's one of the benefits that Forrester research has found as well. Again, as well, what I think is quite valuable as well is that they're much more likely to recommend the company's products. So if they're really someone who's willing to promote that. And I think that ties into something that I think all companies and organizations are really trying to do, which is trying to increase their Net Promoter Score, right, or the NPS. And that's a very hard thing to do for most companies of a certain size, is to see how likely it is that folks will actually recommend your product. So it's substantial if you can get your employees to be your biggest advocates for you. And that's actually a really great use case, particularly tied to the ROI of a mobile application, is that we often see folks in a communications perspective wanting to amplify the effects of their marketing communications. And sometimes if you have a large enough workforce, or if you've got influential staff, making it very easy for them to share social media messages that have been predefined with just one click to their personal network is very, very valuable and ties directly into that use case. And so here's a screenshot of some examples of anecdotal evidence as well from some of our past customers. Again, this is a healthcare client, and these are showing how some of the personal recommendations and quotes that people have given around using the application. So it's always valuable to bring in a blend of obviously statistics and also real life emotional examples of how engaging applications are, because as we know, not everything is about numbers. A lot of times, humans do make decisions based on emotions, and it's really important to see just how enthusiastic and excited folks are to actually use these applications. And so let's get into some real-world examples as well. So one of the things that we've seen is, from a cost savings perspective, we've seen some of our retail clients, if they want to move towards an environment where they can save money on payslips, right? They can actually use that as a way to attract folks into a mobile app so they can see their payslip. But in also that way, having that ability to access it on their phone as opposed to a desktop on home, it's probably going to make them more likely to want to sign up for an electronic payslip and thereby avoiding the cost of a print payslip. It's true as well for when you are handling internal communications. You can think of, if you have a mobile application and it's well adopted, how much money can you save on doing prints on newsletters that are mailed to people's homes that just might get thrown out in the mail, and so on and so forth. There's a really good use case for replacement costs and reducing the cost of existing channels when you have mobile enabled, because it's digital and really accessible by everyone, not just folks that are inside the office. Another really great example from folks that are working in the fast food space was that they were able to speed up the time that it took and reduce that time to really get competitive information about what their competitors were doing. And that's very valuable in the fast food space. So we enable them to actually go and take photographs of competitive storefronts, go into another fast food chain and see what specials and promotions are going on, and then being able to share that back for two-way dialogues and market research. That's a quite an expensive undertaking for certain organizations. As well, being able to speed up just the way that business is done, doing things like swapping shifts. That's a really, really valuable use case. Being able to reduce the time that it takes for folks to handle that and just get on with their workday. I mentioned a few times the healthcare company we worked with, and one of the things that they found very valuable was that folks never could really access their personal HR information, because before, these clinicians who were working in the hospital, they would actually have to go and line up at lunchtime, go into the lunchroom, stand in front of a single computer kiosk, and that was the only way they could actually access the internet or access the HR information, such as their medical and dental benefits enrollment, their vacation days balance, all those things, right? And so being able to do that at any time on a mobile phone answered a really, really pressing need for those folks, brought them into a really a best-of-breed environment for employees working with the HR system. And then that allowed them, in that same breath, it allowed the communications team to use that interest that employees had for what's in it for them, right, to check their HR information and at the same time also see news, polls, and surveys, and other engagement information so that you can really have that better level of communication, so that give and take. And that kind of begs the question, Stefanie, around, from all these wonderful use cases that we just talked about, how do you go about choosing yours, right? What's the best way to go about that to build your own story?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we have been giving you a lot of different ideas and scenarios that we see. And we talked about building out this business case to encompass what benefits you're looking for and what the employees need. And now it's time for you to build a story that's going to resonate with all of your employees and sort of encapsulate all the great information you've gathered along the way. So we tried to give you a handful of use cases that we see to be most common, and really guide you to a point where you figure out the top ones that will resonate best, and know most importantly that this is a journey. So you want your employees to use this employee app for many, many years to come. And so by allowing them to participate in the building out of the robustness of this solution is also super important. So think about the use cases that will have the most impact first. I don't have a magical number for you. I can only guide you to find the ones that we've talked about having impact, tying back to ROI, tying back to those benefits you've identified. But also, most importantly, recognize that it doesn't end there, right? You're constantly allowing the employees to experience new ways of working and new interaction points through this employee app. So you now have your story that involves a handful of use cases, and know that as you roll this out and as adoption continues to grow, you have the chance to give them more and more use cases that become more and more relevant to them in their engagement with the app. So here's a couple of ones that we see most common. Junaid has been peppering you with lots of good ideas along the way. But before you go and now tell everyone about this great business case you've put together, you should really build out your story or your organization's story as the starting point, and the way that you want to see this happen as you embark on rolling out the employee app. So Junaid, I think you have a couple examples, or a couple ways to look at it, I guess, is really what we wanted to share.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Steph. And so, I'll point to an asset that you'll have a link to later at the end of this webinar. But we've, collected about 99 of the most common scenarios that we call like mobile moments that would be relevant for displaying within an employee app. And you might be wondering, like, well, hey, why is Junaid saying moments? What does that mean? Well, the realistic expectation they should have of folks when they're using mobile devices, that it really is just a moment, right? It's one thing to say, well, yeah, I'd like to have HR functions on my phone, but if you want to dig a little bit deeper, the truth is that there are some processes, if they're going to take 5-10 minutes, you might not be able to really complete that long of a transaction if you're going to be, say, waiting in the security line at an airport, or going to up and down an elevator, right? You really want to think of things that are simple. What can you do in less than 30 seconds? Well, folks can certainly read, a blog post. They can certainly approve, a small, travel expense or things that have been piling up on their desk, right? And so really thinking in that lens of having, things that people can achieve in the average session that people, take when they, pull a phone out of their back pocket and put it back in, right? Really less than 30 seconds. And as well, the only way you can do that is if the information is pushed to them in a relevant and personalized fashion. And what that means is that, as you mentioned before, one of the challenges the folks at that pharma company faced was that it's no fun to have to go hunting and pecking for information. You want it to be pushed up to you versus you having to go and kind of browse, by department, then by application, then look up the tasks, right? That just doesn't work in the mobile paradigm. Maybe it works in the desktop realm, but it certainly doesn't fly when you have 30 seconds to a minute on a phone. So you've got to really think about what you can push up to employees very quickly. And as well, it usually is a combination of things that are going to draw people back into an application. Just having corporate communications alone, say, isn't really going to draw people coming back to your app. There's got to be something in there that's going to help them actually get their job done faster besides engagement-related information. Although that's really valuable, we want to think of ways that, as we shared before, you can speed up the day in the life of a manager. You can help someone who is a clerk at a grocery store, help them maybe out with a shift swap because their car broke down, right? Those are real things that can truly make an employee's day better. And in that process, you're gonna win their attention and be able to have information delivered up to them in a fashion that they're going to keep going back for. So I would always think about that. And then that also ties into how we're going to actually present this business case at the end.
Absolutely, and a lot of good work has now gone into this business case. You've done a lot of great diligence around what it means to your organization to provide this employee app, and what it means to the employees to have access to such a great new way to work. And you're ready to go tell the story. So a couple of things to think about is you are still, in most cases I'm guessing, kind of selling this journey to other people. So don't be shy to really build out a compelling presentation that highlights just how important this juncture is for your organization. Don't assume that everybody is just clamoring for the next mobile experience. There are still some folks out there that just may not be sure how amazing this will be for your employees. So don't be afraid to really go out on a limb and create a compelling presentation and storyline that helps the organization realize that the time is now, and there's no more wait and see. This is the time to embark on the mobile experience for your employees. And then the other side is, and this is something that we or I'm sure other organizations or vendors can help you with, is this is something that you need to experience. So we've tried to give you lots of great use case ideas with some screenshots here and there, but until you can actually on your mobile phone interact, it is really hard to get the best experience about how powerful this can be. So build out a quick prototype experience that lets the story speak for itself. And I think Junaid even has an example of an organization who did that really well and had some resounding results by bringing that prototype forward early on in the business case building.
Yeah, indeed, Stephanie. I think that we're embarking upon a new world of productivity, and just as the world changes so quickly with new types of technology, it's hard to sometimes imagine what is an employee app if you've never seen one before, right? I mean, you can imagine folks before, if they've never seen an automobile, good luck explaining to them what an automobile is if they've never seen one, right? So, we always say if a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, imagine seeing the actual app working in front of you and how valuable that will be, right? So, we had the good fortune of working with the executives at a quite large software company in the Pacific Northwest, and we looked at their largest challenge, which was kind of thrown down from the CEO level down, and that was that their goal was to increase employee engagement and attract and retain millennial talent. And you might say, well, okay, well, what does an employee app do with that, right? Well, the reality is that this organization wanted to continue that brand promise of having not only externally being seen as a market leader in providing solutions for thousands and thousands of organizations, but also to be a market leader internally, right? When you are competing for some of the top technical talent in the Silicon Valley area, how do you make sure that when that new college graduate actually joins your organization, that when they start on day one, they open up their laptop and they get their phone for the first time, right? How do you make sure they stay with you and don't churn after 6 months, right? We talked about how expensive it is to find good talent. How do we make sure that they're going to stay and say, like, you know what, I made the right choice. I'm really happy to work here because I can do everything that I really need to do from my phone on the go. This is so slick. It really meets my expectations that I would expect for a real market leader in the technology space. And that's exactly what we provide to them through a prototype. So until folks can actually see the news and notification popping up from people inside the organization, so they can see photographs that are taken on campus, so they can see actually the similar types of workflows or tasks or approvals and data coming from the systems they're used to seeing. Once that happens, it's much more of a just really clicks inside people's heads, because it's no longer an ephemeral concept of saying, hey, what if we had all this in one application? Some people are just visual learners, right? They're never really going to be able to really emotionally connect with your concept if it's just in bullet point or in a 25-page document. And further, by being able to actually have a prototype, you can actually find out not just what works, but what doesn't, right? That's the real value of prototyping. You can say, I like these 5 things, but these 3 other use cases, we would just never do that in the first phase. So why don't we swap that out? Because sometimes, being able to actually use them, play around with it a bit and actually see it on the device is going to be so much more influential than, say, doing a paper and pencil exercise, which is what we saw again with that hands-on workshop that one of our insurance clients again did in Australia.
Great. Thanks, Junaid. I think, Jen, we've been collecting questions, so I'll let you navigate us through what folks are asking.
Absolutely. Thank you both for all that great information. If you do have questions, please submit them through the chat tool. We do have a few that we'd like to address. So one is, Stefanie, I think this is for you. How long does it take to build a business case like this?
Sure. So it's a little hard to answer in a generic term because all of you come from different sized organizations, and we've seen organizations of all shapes and sizes look at an employee app and what the impact has. But I guess my advice would be to not shorten that part of this exercise. So we're all eager to roll out the solution, and we're all eager to move it forward. But these steps that we're doing along the way are so critical. Even if you already have buy-in, it does you a disservice not to capture what the employees need and what the benefits are that you're trying to reach. So definitely give yourself, at least a couple weeks to do it, and then depending on how large your organization is and how hard it's going to be to get some of the employee information or partnership with other parts of the organization, you may need a couple months as well. But the most important part is start that journey now so that you're going on the right path and you're giving your employees what they need sooner rather than later.
Perfect. Another one here, Jeanette, got this one out to you. How long does it take to roll out a solution like this?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, right? So the way that we look at it, the way our architecture is that there are going to be some use cases that are delivered as a SaaS solution in the cloud, and those are ready for deployment immediately, right? And then obviously when you want to connect to systems that are on your back end, those are going to take a little bit longer. But realistically, like phase 1 implementation to get out to your first users, could be anywhere from 1 to 3 months. So we're not talking like big monolithic projects here, because the goal is you want to be able to deploy fast, and iterate quickly, because as Stefanie mentioned, your business probably changes very quickly, and the app should do so as well. So you want to be agile and get something out the door faster to first initial groups and phases, right? And then be able to plan for those larger deployments.
Excellent. So a little bit along those lines, Stefanie, this one's for you. How fast do employees on average adopt these types of solutions?
Great question. So I hate to keep saying it depends, but it depends. But what we're seeing that works really well is rolling this out in groups, for example. So what I've seen work really well is pick, whether it's a region, a department, a subset of folks that you can bring on board all at the same time. You can give everyone access to the app, but focus on groups of people and do some promotion to get them to use the app, because adoption will happen, but you have this window of time in the beginning where you've asked them to go download the app and now their attention is there. So try to focus on populations in your organization that you can get the manager on board to get everybody excited to use the app. Or we have customers who do campaigns and posters, and try to set yourself out targets for reaching different sections of the organization one at a time, so you can really hone in on those folks and get their adoption going, so that you can see adoption happen right from the start. And then the other part I would just say is don't give up. Not every single person is going to download the app and start using it every single minute of the day right away, and that's okay, right? Part of this is also finding out what are the scenarios that are most compelling, and as Jeanette mentioned, iterating. So watch your adoption and think about what are the new things you can add to bring adoption further along, is how I would look at it.
That's right, and you never go at it alone. Obviously, your vendor should be helping the customer success teams to help you with that and share those adoption plans, and make sure they're relevant for your organization, because no two organizations are really alike.
Great point.
One other thing too I would actually like to add too is once you start doing that rollout, start to look for the champions, the early adopters, the people that are super jazzed and get it and want to help, and use them and empower them to be your evangelists. Especially if you have a diverse population in different organizations throughout the world. Use those evangelists and empower them to help you spread the word and get other people excited, and they can help, and even from a support technology perspective, because not everybody gets it. So use them.
Mm-hmm.
They're a great resource. One other quick question here, I think we're going to wrap up, is how much should one budget for an employee app? I think, Junaid, that'd be a good one for you.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So obviously these solutions vary from vendor to vendor, right? You can go online to figure out pricing as well. Like we vendor are pretty transparent, so you can go on our website to check it out. I think that what's important is to find a solution that you can grow with, obviously, and that's right size for you guys. I think that the way to think of it is to really look at the alternatives too as well, right? So we found that, and a lot of the more mature organizations we talked to found as well, that having a consolidated employee app is certainly less expensive than rolling out a separate HR app and a communications app and a workflow app and so on and so forth. So it's also helpful to look at alternatives to this demand that employees have today for mobility as well. But most vendors these days are pretty good about putting it on their website, so I would just go ahead and check it out. And if the vendor doesn't put it on their website, maybe that's a red flag. But yeah, have a look around.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for all of your great questions and for spending this time with us. Thank you, Junaid and Stefanie, for joining us today and sharing all of this awesome practical information and examples. For those of you joining us, we hope you found the information we shared today to be valuable in building your business case for an employee app. And like both Stefanie and Junaid said, we're here to help, so please reach out anytime. You may want to download our how-to guide as a companion piece to this webinar, literally called Building a Business Case for an Employee App. It contains some more helpful information. And there's also another ebook that Junaid mentioned previously called 99 Use Cases, and that's just a really quick ebook way to just scan through and see what pops out into use cases that you may be able to hone in on your organization that can help you start this process. Also, if you'd like to try Sitrion One today on your smartphone, we do have a 30-day free trial on our website. You can go to citrion.com/test drive. And with that, I would just like to say thank you again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.